Bienvenidos. Welcome. I'm Karen Engel, and I'm co-director of the Rapoport Center for Human Rights and Justice here at UT, and my co-director, Daniel Brinks, is sitting right there. And it's my pleasure to introduce you to this event this afternoon, Rights, Resources, Territory, the Struggles of the Garifuna and Lenca in Honduras, which will feature a conversation between two incredible community leaders, Berta Cáceres and Miriam Miranda Chamorro. And Berta is sitting back here in orange, and Miranda there. And as I said a moment ago, if you weren't here, if you need translation from my English to English, no, if you need translation, there is equipment over there, and they're doing simultaneous translation both ways. And I'll just take the opportunity to thank the Austin Language Justice Coalition for providing that interpretation for us today. So the conversation, and they were very thrilled to do it because of past experiences with Berta. We're having a conversation today. It'll be facilitated by Joe Berra, who is sitting right there. And the event is co-presented with the Rothko Chapel in Houston, Texas. And so I'm pleased to recognize Sissy Farenthold here, who we're going to have a lot of clapping to do, but everyone is worth it. I just can't do it with my microphone. So Sissy is former chair of the board of the Rothko Chapel and very instrumental in the award that I'm about to tell you about. And she's also a very important person to the Rapoport Center and many others. So Joe will formally introduce Miriam and Berta in a moment. But first I want to tell you why they're here with us today. And to acknowledge a few other visitors who are with us as well. So Berta and Miriam are in Texas this week because they're joint recipients of the Rothko Chapel's biennial Oscar Romero Award, which is an award given in memory of Archbishop Romero of El Salvador, who most of you know, I assume, was assassinated while giving Mass in 1980 because of his outspoken advocacy on behalf of the poor and against human rights violations, and is urging the church to get on board with that. This year he was declared a martyr by Pope Francis, and he was beatified in May. But the Rothko Chapel wasn't waiting for that, so they've been giving this award since 1986. And the award to honor Romero's memory is given to those working under extraordinary circumstances to advance human rights. And as you'll see in a moment, that's an understatement for Miriam and Berta. Berta and Miriam will receive their awards in Houston on Thursday, but the Rapoport Center has been privileged to have them come a couple of days early, and to work with the Rothko Chapel on this event, as well as a series of events in Houston and Austin leading up to today. And today, in fact, is the final of the pre-award events, and it's particularly special because it's the only one that has included the award recipients. So I want to recognize a few other people, and you should feel free to keep clapping before I introduce Joe. First, I want to thank Julia Dem, who is sitting back there, who is a postdoctoral fellow at the Rapoport Center, and who has thought through and coordinated much of today's event, as well as other meetings we've had leading up to the time with Berta and Miriam today. And I should say, Berta and Miriam have been extraordinary. We've been with them since 8:30 this morning and haven't let them stop. And Julia's learned a lot of Spanish along the way, has done a terrific job. I also want to recognize from Mexico City, we have Ana Paula Hernandez here, sitting between Joe and Miriam. Ana Paula is from the Fund for Global Human Rights. She's worked and traveled with both Miriam and Berta, and has partnered with the Rothko Chapel and us in the events leading up to the award and the events, many, going way back, events leading up to the award, and has been with us today as well, and we've really been lucky to have her here and have the chance to get to know and learn from her. So thank you, Ana Paula, for coming. And finally, I'd like to acknowledge Alan Pogue, documentary photographer extraordinaire, for the slideshow he put together for us at the beginning of the event. That was based from, he spent some time in Lenca and Garifuna territory a few years ago, and put together some of those photos from the Garifuna for us today. We're honored to be able to showcase a tiny bit of his fabulous work as we've benefited over and over from him and his generosity. Okay, so Joe Berra, who's going to facilitate the discussion and introduce Miriam and Berta. Joe's a human rights lawyer and a former Jesuit who's been working in Honduras since the early 1980s. Part of his work there has been through his board membership of the Caribbean Central American Research Council, or CARC, a nonprofit organization based in Austin and working with Black and Indigenous communities in Central America. He's worked with the Garifuna on some of their land claims, and you'll hear about that, I'm sure, in the discussion. Joe is currently a lawyer at the Texas Civil Rights Project. He's leaving at the end of the year, which is sad news for Austin, but he is going to be director of clinical programs at UCLA, and so it's been great actually to spend this little bit of time planning this event, and look forward to continuing to work with you on the coast. So, Berta, Miriam, Joe.
Miriam y Joe, bienvenidos. Welcome. 1,000 thanks for being with us.
Please join me in welcoming them.
Well, I'm going to sit down because we're going to be seated up here while I introduce our distinguished guests. Thank you, Karen, for inviting me. Thanks to the Rothko Chapel for recognizing these wonderful women. I think I'm going to be speaking in Spanish, so is it okay if I just give the introduction in Spanish, then they can understand it as well? Bueno, es un gran privilegio y honor.
It is a great privilege and honor to present to you these
amigas, Miriam, Miranda,
friends,
Miriam,
Miranda and Berta Cáceres.
Yo conozco a Miriam
I
desde hace
know
mucho tiempo,
Miriam
a Berta conozco
from a long time ago, and Berta a little less, but the two women are examples, incredible examples of struggle and commitment. I can say that they know how to put lawyers in their place. Here in the center where they train new lawyers, it's a good lesson to learn. We are not who manage the cases. Instead, they themselves have managed their own cases with intelligence, capacity, tremendous, to show others how to do these struggles. The two work like general coordinators of their respective organizations. Miriam is the coordinator, general coordinator of the organization, Black Fraternal Honduran organization representing the Garifuna community in Honduras. And Berta is the general coordinator of the organization of popular communities, the Lincoln communities in the country. The two have been involved in the struggles of their communities and those struggles in defense of their territories and resources, and also for the rights of their communities, the Afro and Indigenous communities. The two have put their lives at risk to do this work. The two have been threatened, criminalized, and in fact they are under charges that have been provisionally suspended, but stays communities as a threat from the state, and yet they still keep working with being devout and continuing to do these struggles. I don't want to say much about them because they can talk about themselves much more than I can about in the conversation that we're going to have. That's it's a small introduction of these two women who I have to say. I'm so happy to be here to sharing this, and as a humble moderator, and I expect to learn as the public will from all the wisdom that you bring. Applause, please. Well, I was asked to be a moderator of a conversation, but I'm going to speak very little so that they can speak. I am going to give myself maybe 2 rounds of questions for them, and then we are going to open the conversation to all. Right? Then, firstly, I ask each one to give us a little bit of context of your struggles for the territory and resources that you defend for your communities. Both Garifuna and Lenca community, a little bit of context in how these struggles have been for these territories and defensive resources. With a look. Well, first, thank you, everyone who made the effort to help organize this event and for being here. Well, we're going to have a conversation. I'm going to start with understanding a little bit about the context in which we come from and the role and the processes that we have been putting in place in our regions. In the Lenca community, we are a community that's about the corn. We're in the southern part. It's a mountainous region. We are a population of 400,000 in the country, although the government always has said that we are less. Today, in fact, they said that the Lenca community doesn't exist. We are confronting what the Honduran community has been missing for the last 500 years. In the last 500 years, it's been about exploitation, the intense exploitation of our forests, the violations of our spiritual, the constant violation of our individual rights, and especially when we are women and we are in the leadership of these processes. The politicians, the big business has been wanting to give up to 30% of the land of Honduras to big business, and it has these implications. All the rivers in the country, there are these projects that, in terms of the exploitation of wood and the people that put mediation and the
the sale of environmental services is seen as solutions of climate change, and the process and what we are going through. So the people have been heavily impacted by that process. We face more than 52 hydroelectric projects, 60 projects of energy at the big scale, also many mining projects. And it's very it's very difficult situation in terms of the pressure of the capital. It becomes increasingly more intense. There have been 10 of our fellow friends have been killed in their work defending the territory. In terms of the water, we have a process of resistance. We had been in this struggle for 22 years in '93, and then with against people who are very important. We might refer to that later. And since and we studying the reading, we are facing not just one type of domination. There are multiple, but at the end it's just one. It is capitalism, patriarchy. You cannot speak about if the situation if you don't see the role of the women. So we need to struggle for the sovereignty, the self-determination of territories, our cultures, and also for our bodies, our sexuality. And in a place, of course, where the women we as women are. So there are many things we can address those. We have been facing an extermination policy as indigenous peoples. We are facing the worst threat in the last 500 years. There is a plan, funded, structured, plan, thought, very well thought, to make us disappear as indigenous people. And that's for us, that amounts to genocide. Thank you. Thank you so much. Maybe, what can I say? The Garifuna people is a hybrid. It's hybrid people, indigenous and African. It's a people with a dark skin, with black skin, as you saw in the pictures. But culturally, we're indigenous. We're a mixture of Caribbean, indigenous, Arhuaco, that happened in the island of San Vicente, in front of Venezuela. We have our own culture, and there has been always be a confusion when we arrive here to the north, because most of the Garifuna people don't speak English, and so the question is you being black, don't speak English. And especially when you go to the immigration enforcement, that's an evidence of the lack of knowledge about the cultures and peoples in the world. That they can be black, but they don't speak English, and that has been always a struggle. And I myself have to face that. And sometimes I get into a fight with someone. They tell me, you have to speak English. And I say, no, I don't speak English. But I wanted to start with this because I think it's very important to understand the diversity in which we live in the planet. And even though there is a system for just one culture that really goes against the other cultures, we go to the other extreme because we are on the Caribbean coast, on the Atlantic, and the Lencas are from the mountainous areas. So they are the peoples from the mountains, and we're the people from the beach. And in some of the gatherings, when we gather the people from the beach and from the mountains. So this is a people that it is that has been singled out since 2004 when it was declared World Heritage. And when that happened, we say, what is that? What will be that? Because World Heritage, it means something. That was declared by the UNESCO. When we were declared World Heritage. So that category has been assigned to people that have a different culture, but it should be state cultures that allow them to strengthen that identity, that cultural identity. And we live in a country that every day increasingly destroys the the culture, there is a policy for a state policy for exterminating the people, for exterminating the differences, by exterminating the differences, but also the collectivity, the communality. That's a policy that comes from here, from the north, with the purpose to make us everyone the same. So the cultures is an example where you have some animals. How do you call them in a bucket? The crabs. How do you call them? The crabs. So one them, to climb, then gets the one down. So that's an example of how the competence and the individualism shows. But we think that we should be like ants, that we should pass one another the voice, that we should help one another. So those are concepts of life that are very deep. And we, as Garifuna Community, we are located along the coast. We are facing not only what my friend was saying, but I want to emphasize something that has to do with the north, that it is the drug trafficking. It's that the Garifuna people are in the path of 70% of the drug trafficking to the north, and that has put the Garifuna people in a crisis of security, and we are in a permanent struggle for survival because our communities are militarized and they are also being displaced, but especially intervene and then in the name of the war on drugs, the narco trafficking. And this is a policy that it is wrong, is hypocritical, because we know which are the nations that produce the raw materials, but the ones that are the communities that are persecuted are the ones that are on the path of the drug trafficking. So we call it a hypocritical policy that the U.S. Carries out for the war on drugs, because that industry generates a lot of wealth for the banks, for the people who deal with arms, and for many groups here in the north. But the communities in the south, really, we suffer those attacks. And the consumption takes place here. So think about it. It goes through there, and we are hurt, but something that is consumed in the north. And this is a very important element that we're facing, and we're struggling against that. And I want to tell you, we are also putting our bodies, our culture, our thoughts for the defense of the territories. And we have been able to achieve that through that struggle. We have achieved the first territory free of drug trafficking. In a community that we went in, which some of us were kidnapped, and there was a killing attempt, and that's one of the worst people that can happen to you. That then you are with a hitman, and I had to go through that. That you're faced by a hitman, but it shows the fragility. If you live in a state that puts you in a siege, the level of violence of the organized crime and drug trafficking has really has determined the system. So you don't know where you can go and launch a complaint. You don't know if you go and do a launch a complaint, you're not sure that person is that authority is related to the drug trafficking. So it's a very complex situation, because we live in a narco state, a democracy that for me is a failed state, because there is no institutionality after the coup d'etat, but also a country where everything is dictated from abroad, how it should be ruled. And that's the worst thing that can happen when there is no independence, there is no autonomy, there is no sovereignty from the decision makers. to be able to govern a country and rule the country. So I think I have said it many times that one thing is being a president and another thing is to rule. And I say, so I say, is that true that Obama rules? Who has the power here? So this is something that we are facing because we are countries that are kidnapped, not the countries in Latin America where the international capital is the one that rules. Transnational capital makes the decisions, and especially in an era in which the transnational capital goes after all the last natural resources and common goods. So the common goods are coming to an end. The transnational capital needs the resources, and there are communities that have been there through the millennia or centuries, and they are after us. That is the reality, and that's the struggle that we live in. The Lenca community, the indigenous peoples, are in this struggle of that it is very unequal, unbalanced, because if the states respond to the interests of capital, that's what we're facing in Honduras. So I think it's important to give this context, because we're not just communities in resistance, peoples in resistance for the territories where we are also resistant a model of life that it is increasingly most destructive, that increasingly goes after the resources and increasingly destroys the humanity. So this is something that we have to tackle. We appreciate enormously the acknowledgement that you're giving us, because this is an opportunity as well to say the word in these spaces, and also for sharing. So then you can look and then see if there are some people who are resisting this model who is destroying. And before I finish, I want to say that we are struggling against a model of development model that it is imposed every day. We had been talking. Some of you were in this conversation that we were talking about this development model that it's not viable, it's unsustainable. It's not going to be able to maintain itself in history because it's predatory. And we that are over there, we are not superwomen. Some will think that we are superwomen, but no. We are fellow women that are with lots of people in resistance. Berta, when she goes to Rio Blanco, and the fellow, and so our role is to bring the voices of what's happening here and bring it here. So we're women, as many other women, with all that what it means to be a woman, but with the privilege of being part of a process in which we consider that it is necessary for we were responsible for the future generations. So that's what we have been struggling with. And what Joe was saying is right. We have put our lives on the line. We have been threatened. We have been arrested. And I remember when when I was arrested in Tela, when I was in jail, the first call that I got was from Berta. She calls me and tells me, Miriam, and she was in this place. I was stinky with the police like pressing me psychologically, and for me it was such a relief to get a phone call from Berta, because I know that she will put that she will really do the thing that it was required to let the people know. So when I was kidnapped, so I'm telling you, we're women. No, we're not super women. We're just women because we continue moving forward. It's not easy, but that's where we are into, and so we think that you give us the opportunity to be of being together here, because you usually, not long ago, she was in Malaysia, and I was in Kenya. I have a problem. I get the African countries mixed together. This is the first time that we do a tour together. That's very interesting. So that's what we are doing as communities struggling. And we would like us to have this dialogue, to talk among ourselves and to see how do you see it? How do you see this? And also to say at last that we think that it is very important for us that you understand that the problem is not the South, the political South, but it is, but it is also what you can do here. So, because it is not just like the planet is north and south, east and west. So we have to see how we all take responsibility wherever we are to generate change. It's not it's not no longer just responsibility from us in the south. You have to think how can we do to strengthen the communality, the collectivity. That's what I will say.
I'm going to say one more question. One more question that will help us get some specific examples of your struggle. You have struggled for collective rights, and you have utilized a number of different mediums, strategies, direct action, political action, and the legal system, sometimes of the country itself, the judicial system that is a lot against you, which can seem contradictory, and also the international legal system, with I imagine their limitations and advantages. But for example, Berta, and the example of the Rio Blanco community against the hydroelectric project that you succeeded in stopping, and a story that's very interesting. Maybe you all can comment a little bit about the strategies and the struggles, and what types of activities did you use, and who did you face off against. And Miriam, you can choose from the different cases that you've had and the cases that are in front of the courts at the moment in Rio Piedras or Vallecitos that you just finished mentioning. Well, in reality, it is not the first hydroelectric project that we stopped. We've been able to stop 14 hydroelectric plant projects. And one before, there was a binational huge project that was going to create a 130-meter sheet of water that would have impacted the Lencan communities in Salvador as well as Honduras. And we confronted transnational companies, the World Bank, a company from Germany, in both governments. And we did succeed. It was a struggle of 16 years. And, well, lots of struggles. The expulsion of more than 30 different companies exploiting the wood industry. And, well, the more recent, more well-known Rio Blanco, that was threatening a sacred river that crosses our territory. is in the highest part of this particular community, and they've been trying to privatize this. A list of these different companies that have been trying to privatize it, but because of the work of all of these different communities, we were able to stop it. In the lower region of the White River, in the sector of a number of these communities, there was a company that came in 2006, and since then the communities were telling them not to continue what they were doing. And in 2010, with more power, these multinationals, especially with the coup that happened, is more strength, more power, these companies, and more impunity to violate human rights. In 2010, there are all of these signatures of people who don't actually know how to read and write, and documents that were false, and there was no consultation with the community like with the rest of the projects and previous projects that have been exploiting gold and silver and other minerals. And so in 2010, the company was telling the community was telling the company not to invest, because whatever they were going to invest, they were going to lose, because the communities did not have, were not agreeing. But so in 2010, the process of continuing to try to take away the territory, there was a highway that was created by the same company, and there started a big struggle that lasted day and night for 2 years, and now it has returned. We succeeded so that on July 15th, the concession was given to one company that presents itself as Honduran capital. The owner is someone that came out of West Point and is very close to the military and related to wealthy families and a particular bank in a very forceful and violent manner. They subcontract from the largest company in the world. And on July 15th in 2013, we succeeded in banishing them with a very strong struggle, a sustained struggle. And sure, we had heavy costs. The assassination of one of our compañeros at the hands of the army, and his son as well. We did succeed in stopping this project. The solidarity, international solidarity, was fundamental. There was judicial persecution. They accused us of having weapons. Accusing of usurping the land belonging to the company. The losses, continual losses of millions. The first time it was me who was charged, and then it was also my other comrade who's here as well. And the company was saying that we had to pay them $7 million in the first 2 months and $49 million for the company, the hydroelectric company. The thing is that we started a very strong conversation, a debate, a supposed legal in the face of a judicial system that was doing this, working with the multinationals and these the military created a tremendous environment of repression in these communities with the army, with the police, with the security, with everyone running the state. And what we were saying was that our laws and our reality is above all. And so the lawyers need to understand in the struggles of the people, it is our historical laws and practices. And then we continued to do that strong struggle. Was also involved was the World Bank, the Holland Bank, the Development Bank of Finland. And also another German. We've done all these campaigns in Europe to try to stop this. The thing is that we did succeed in stopping this project. It has been very hard, and we lost 4 people, 3 men and 1 woman, and children hurt, threatened, women sexually harassed, threatened, a lot of things. And this year, 2 months ago, I wanted to say that the country never canceled the concessions, and so that company returned. Not on our side, not where we are, on the other side of the river, using always the corruption that exists. 2 months ago started, and they've come with everything, The big machinery that has been installed.
Every military repressive system, there are special commands with tigers that are under the direction of the U.S., and I'm denouncing this. Funding by the U.S. is the military police. It's a structure that is paramilitary, that is controlled by Orlando Hernandez, who is the president. There is presence of them, and also a private security company. So the community had restarted. The community has restarted a conquer of the territory and facing those all that structures. The company's strategy was first searching which organizations were involved, and so then to go ahead and to criminalize it, to prosecute us. And they had also undertaken a media campaign, very strong. So our fellow comrades have to cross the river. They are building a larger place. So that's why Miriam said we have to put our bodies, because they are heavily armed, and they have these very modern weapons, and they can really have a look at us. They have used very sophisticated equipment. Some of us have been threatened and also have been victims of attacks. And the last Friday before coming here, just few hours before the UN special relator for human rights, we were victims of attacks, and they don't care. The next day, the relator came, and she herself was retained by the employees of that company. It's an American company, and Rio Synergy and Hydro of Canada. So she was able to corroborate what we go through. What I want to say is that project, and the owner of the company, he says he's going to do no matter what. he claims that he's not in Lenca territory. We have told him he's wrong. Lenca territory historically goes all the way to Cortez, Santa Barbara, and even all the way to Francisco Morazan, the east and El Salvador, and even beyond there. So the other thing is that they are not going to impose limits in our struggle. Tell us the name. Let us know the name of the river where you are going to do the next project. It's the same Walcari River. So that struggle from Rio Blanco symbolizes the historic struggle because we of the Lenca people, because we are rebel people, we have never been submissive. And of course, we had been victims of criminalization, especially if we're women. It is even harder. They step on everything, on our bodies, our sexuality, our rights to know political processes of emancipation. So that's a crime in Honduras, especially if the women do it. It is not well seen. What has they say it in their campaign? We're lesbian women coming from dysfunctional families. We're witches. We're bitches. We're thieves. We're terrorists. Part of the international terrorism. Everything they have said about us. But I'm saying this so you know the levels of what we are exposed to. Our families have been threatened. Copying constantly. I have protective measures from 2009, as Miriam from the Inter-American Commission, and it was just only now when the special realtor came, when they started to really put them in force. But what did they offer? 24-hour protection with the police? If the police is the one that it is really protecting the company, so that's ridiculous. The day before coming here, the house where I live was assaulted. The man came to my bedroom. There were other things. He took our computer, a very important computer for copying. And that's something that is very common, not just the threats, but beyond the judicial persecution. What we are exposed is mostly exposed to physical aggression and also psychological aggression. So that's what I'm saying, that the struggle in Rio Blanco has been reactivated. It's very strong. We are very concerned. The community is determined that the project will not be carried out, and there will be more polarization. It will generate more strategies for defense of the territory. I would like to talk about the Garifuna community, something that has to do with what Berta said. We have to understand that we live in a model of life that make us addicted to fossil fuel, to petroleum. So the decision makers they are trying to determine how to generate energy, because we're not paying attention to the energy that we're using, especially in the north, in the age of the finger. Everything is with the finger. You just touch everything. We don't realize that it's becoming so. And then they tell us that maybe you're too radical, that there is no energy. Maybe that's the truth, but I think the time came that we have to be responsible with the future generations. I think we need to generate alternatives of energy, and for that the whole humanity needs to work. if we want the humanity to continue existing. If not, we are condemned to not to exist. And so the mining, everything has to be do with energy. So energy is a theme of that. It has to be a theme of debate in all the spaces, because you always say that it is that we're against this, the development, and we say the development for whom? What is it? What is that? So that's a topic that we have to put on the table. For the indigenous people, they don't care what's happening. And then, yeah, we need to focus on clean energy and renewable energy. So, yeah, we have to put attention to the cost of building this. So I wanted also to share quickly two things. One is we as organizations, we decided to work for the apart from what Berta had said about all the struggles, we decided to try to use the Inter-American system, the Commission and the Court. In 2003, we presented one unique, only case, and the Commission decided to split it. And after 15 years or several years, now we are close to two rulings that have been already decided, but hasn't been published. And they took elements from two cases. We went to a hearing, public hearing. You can find it last August last year on La Cruz, on the Triumph of La Cruz. It was an incredible experience. 75 people went from Honduras to Costa Rica, most of them elderly. It was so incredible. We were saying, even if it's the last thing that we do, I want to see where this ends, this trial that has been so long about the revindication of the Garifuna rights. And that was, if you see those yellow buses, we have to take one of those school buses. We have to take one of those buses. It's not one of those little bit comfortable. But we went. And what were the findings? That there was a testimony from the state, and that was incredible, to deny the identity of the Garifuna people. And they were saying, no, they are not entitled to anything because they are not part of Honduras. So they started to use the term newly arrived. And that's extremely dangerous because, in fact, by saying that we are not Hondurans, they were justifying all the criminalization and the expulsion of the communities. And that's the state policy today, to deny the identity and the rights that we have as Garifuna people. And it was so clear that the representative of the state told it in the hearing. It was incredible. We could not believe this, that they could get to go to a trial, a public hearing in the system as the Inter-American Court, and come with that argument, telling that no, they have no right because they are not Hondurans, because they are traitors. That was incredible, and that shows not only the racism, but also how do they respond to the interests of the people? The 10 wealthiest people they are not from Honduras, and nobody tells them that they are newly arrived. They are foreigners. Nobody questions their identity. So I think it's how the state uses any excuse to deny the identity and the rights of the people. So that's a theme for many of you who are studying law. It's a very important issue, because the only one who write in favor of the state, amicus curiae, was Guatemala. Guatemala was supporting Honduras against the Garifunas, even though they also have a Garifuna people, and we were able to witness that. The positioning, they came with pictures that was edited about the Garifunas, how many students, something that has nothing to do. Another thing that I wanted to say that with the triumph, we generated some jurisprudence on the indigenous rights. So the commission demands, as a response in the case of Triumph for La Cruz, that they generate some actions against the previous consultation. So that's a contribution that we are doing to all the indigenous peoples of the world, because this applies not only to the Garifuna, it applies to indigenous people all over. In Punta Piedra, it will be a international jurisprudence in terms of the titles that are given, the community titles that are given to those indigenous community. You can see that in Santiago Sula, these decisions have been made without consultation. So that's why the struggle is to the for us. So I want to tell you that many of the movements and organizations don't believe. They have a right not to believe in the international inter-American system, but if we have not have gone to the inter-American system, we have never achieved that the government will have to listen. The government was forced to talk to us and listen to us in Washington. And even though
Yes, we could lie and say that we are going to do what they're saying. We would return to our countries, and nothing that we had said there we would comply with, but we had to keep constructing a process to be able to bring more exposure to the problems happening in our communities. And this has served us well, because the governments have been not only to do damage to us, but to also develop a process to be able to consult with us is something that has been very important to defend the rights, collective rights. Because this process also talks about the collective rights, the community rights, for us to be consulted, to be asked. But there's a lot of things that have to do with that. In the case of Punta Piedras, the state gave a title to the community, and then give titles of possession to others over the land of the Garifuna. And I wanted to share this with you who are lawyers, because the international law is something that we need to keep deepening. The way these governments have been responding more because of international pressure than to be able to respond to and to resolve the conflicts, the violations, the human rights violations. And also there was another case that is also important for me to share with you, is that the governments, the countries, are always looking for some way to divide the communities, and this happens, also with these projects, because in the case of some of these mineral projects, these big projects they're doing all over the world and all the continents, there's a direct intervention from the government. But also wanted to share with you that today the companies, the transnational capital, are directly going to communities. Why? Because the government, they're substituting, they're acting as government. They're going directly to the communities. They're directly present in these communities. We were able to see, and we've been seeing in some of our direct experiences, where they are directly dealing with the necessities of the community. These are communities that are very poor. They don't have access to even the most basic things, and this companies will come in and say, we're going to put a school, we're going to put something, anything. And so they are substituting themselves the role of the government and in doing that so that the communities can accept the implementation of these projects. It's not just the formal thing from up there. These days they have the doors open to go directly to the communities, not just to attack like in Rio Blanco, but there are where they go directly to the communities to fool the people, so that people can think that they can believe in them. And so you do find these companies that think that these companies are giving me things that the government haven't given me, and so they're good people, right? It's a Machiavellian thing because they're playing with the necessities of the people. And this is an element that we need to give more light to. It's a struggle that we need to expose more of these kinds of consultations with communities where it's this complicated situations where not just the U.S., it's Chinese, Taiwanese, it's a capital from all these different places looking for all these resources. And I want to end sharing with you all one of these experiences. And in one of our cases, something we were doing just by ourselves. We went all the way through the commission by ourselves. It was an incredible learning process. We did not need an umbrella to take our case, and we succeeded in all of the witnesses were lots of our community members, old women who came to the commissions to testify. And it's not that we, are against lawyers and all the help, but we do think that it's those voices, our people, that should be heard. And it was, Joe was with us in one of these meetings, and it's not me that talks, and I tell them I'm going to bring our comrades, and they listen to them, listen to how they're living and what their problems are. Of course, we continue in a strong struggle. Some are complementary. Some of these governments do say we can't comply, but we are confronting major struggles, like the special zones, the model cities, the model areas, an invention of this crazy, from here, economists, sorry. And what he said was that these model cities, these perfect to get out of poverty, the best, and I don't know what, and convinced this government, our government decision makers, and give them absolute, giving transnational companies the right to do whatever they want. And the worst is that there are no local judicial process, that a third party being done outside. Because we need to be able to do this locally, and in this case we need to do it with a third party outside the country. We have no control. Just a little while ago he was here in Texas, and he came to do this, to promote these special zones, development zones, as this latest invention. And I think that this is one of the things. And it's all the country that's available for concessions to transnational capital. And so let's open up. Thank you. A lot of information. A lot to absorb from all of this, and perhaps a lot of questions that arise. And so let's open it up to the first round of questions, maybe 3 questions first to respond to, and see if we can have maybe 2 rounds or more with the public. Someone has a question? Didn't understand anything, or everything was so clear?
microphone. Can you hear me?
Bertita, póngase
Okay.
chunche.
I think Miriam said this, but you referred to, I think you called it a new development model, but I didn't understand what the new development model is.
Ajá.
You were talking about, said it was a new development model that's not sustainable and is predatory. And I was just curious what that new development model is.
Ajá. Perfecto. Sí. ¿Qué es? ¿A qué me refiero con
Entonces,
modelo de desarrollo?
vamos con
And
dos o
so
tres preguntas.
then let's get 2 or
Esta es la
3
primera.
questions.
¿Alguien
That's the
más tiene
first
alguna
one.
pregunta?
Anyone else has another question?
Sí, para la traducción.
Entonces, si la pregunta ella no sé si
And so the
quisiera
question,
el modelo, ¿cuál es el
I-
modelo
oh,
más negativo que tenemos ahora
Sí.
o cuál es el modelo de
Sí,
desarrollo
What
que
is-
se imaginan ustedes? Yo quisiera oír
what is the
también,
Sí,
¿no? ¿Cuál es
perfecto.
realmente
model that use of development that economically that
ustedes lo imaginan?
that you can imagine that is sustainable? So what is an example of a development model that would help communities and is sustainable?
Y una más allá.
And one more over here.
Bueno, primeramente muchas gracias por estar aquí. Quería preguntarles, bueno,
Thank you
viendo
for being
que
here. I want to ask you,
van allá- van
seeing
más
that
allá de
your
fronteras del
communities
país,
go
quería saber si
beyond
tienen,
the boundaries of the
articulan
country.
su resistencia con quizás, no sé, comunidades en países vecinos o qué
And
tal,
so is there some
si es
efforts
posible.
in the resistance with communities in the other countries?
Bueno,
Yo tal vez voy a comenzar con un ejemplo.
And so I'm going to start with an example about this
Esta
question.
pregunta sobre el modelo de desarrollo.
Because this question over the model of development is very important and necessary.
Con Berta vamos a poder
With Berta,
comentarla.
it's going to be able to complement.
Generalmente cuando
Generally,
ha habido, digamos,
when
oposición
there has been opposition
los recursos
to
naturales,
the sharing of the development of the resources,
el
and
proyecto
I'm going
Bahía de
to put
Tierra,
as an example the project,
que es un proyecto donde se construyó un
a
campo de
specific
golf,
project where there was a golf course that was constructed. And what was destroyed were many areas,
manglares, se destruyeron desoladeros de tortugas, zonas
areas where the turtles would go to.
con cemento,
They were filled with cement,
grandes
cement,
tierra manglar.
large extensions of this bay.
Es una zona que se
And it's
supone,
an
aparte de
area
ser área protegida,
that, aside from being a protected area, it was one that was identified as a very important biodiversity ecological zone. When this project was proposed,
nosotros hicimos
we
una campaña
did a
por la
campaign
destrucción ambiental
because of the
y
environmental
nos dijeron que
destruction,
nosotros estábamos en contra del
and
desarrollo.
we were told that we were against development.
Igual pasa cuando las compañeras
The same happens when
luchando contra la represa,
the
la explotación.
women are fighting against the exploitation of the minerals. And we have a model of development that's based on exploitation and of the common resources. It doesn't matter if you analyze in this moment what's happening in the Amazon and all these zones, because there's all these
Se están
forests
destruyendo
that
cada
are
día.
being destroyed every
Miles de
day.
hectáreas de bosque.
Thousands
Todo
of
en nombre del desarrollo, para
hectares
generar
of
carreteras,
forest
para sacar
yeah,
recursos de
to
ahí, para
and
sacar bosques, no solamente
highways to take
sacar
things
recursos de
out,
por
the
fuera.
resources
Eso
out
es
of the
para el
ground, and not just the
desarrollo.
wood. And this
Cuando
is
nosotros
for
alzamos
development.
nuestra voz para que se
When we
respeten
raise
la
our
tierra,
voices to
los recursos naturales,
respect
la
the natural
y el
resources, the
segundo,
land,
¿qué significa para nosotros
what
los
does
bienes
that
comunes?
signify
Para
for us,
nosotros
these
significa que
common
el agua es de todos y
resources?
todas.
The water is for everyone.
Significa que los árboles son
Signifies
de
that
todos
the
nosotros.
trees are for all of
Porque a
us.
todos nos sirven. Y por eso yo decía de que ya hay días no solamente tenemos que hablar del sur, porque los bosques que están protegidos allá ayudan a respirar esta parte del norte. ¿O no es cierto? Eso no necesita ciencia, porque hay una fragilidad ecológica que se ha aumentado.
There's a fragility. There's a fragility, environmental fragility that has increased because of the exploitation of resources. So we're talking about that, about a model of life that is based on destruction of what life gives us. So we think that that's something that it is not viable, and that cannot be. That cannot be, absolutely. So now with climate change, with the environmental crisis, there is a point on the table, and there are many campaigns that say the climate change happened a long time ago and that it will regenerate itself, but that is not true. There are losses. Just to give you an example of what's happening, just to tell you about the coral reefs. I don't know if you have seen on the internet the loss of the coral reefs because of global warming. And you can see that a holistic, we see it as holistic, that has to do with a logic that one thing fits another and another, and it's been destroyed, and that's all on the name of development. And this is something that we think that we needs to be questioned for the good of the future generations, because this way of life that it is where there with where consumerism, because it's not happens just in the north. This has been exported to countries like Honduras. Here in the U.S., I'm sorry, but you exist if you consume. If you don't consume, you don't exist. I'm sorry, but that is true. The people exist as long as they consume. But I think there are other ways of living, to be in communion with others, especially of humanized life. We need to humanize life because because life is dehumanizing, and this is something that it is so nefast. Some people say that they take care more of their car than their partner, their women, and that's the material is first, second, and third, and the human is at the end. And we have to flip the tortilla. We have to say that the human is most important, goes first. So that's what I was talking with my friend. It's not that we don't want the energy. People tell us that we want to go to the back, to the time when there was no energy, that when you were in the caverns. No, it's not true. That's not what we want. What we want is that this planet is able to survive beyond these current generations, and that requires a collective responsibility. Why? Because there are places where air needs to be bought. It's so polluted that they can't. So the model of life that we're seeking is the one that we have over there that needs to be respected. So when you ask me about which model of life is it, it's the model of life that we have it. So for us to be respected, we need that we have what we need to eat. That we don't have to look for that in the heaven or another planet is there. But the problem is that every day is denied the possibility. We're told that we need to leave our territories because modernity is arriving, and it's a cement plant that it is coming and destroying animals in the water, destroys everything. And that's not utopic. That is not a dream. It's a reality that we see there. But they want to they want to make us uniform, to make us the same as the U.S. And that's impossible. It's practically impossible. Yes. Well, as Lenca people, we have a very strong relationship with the land. to cultivate it, to grow corn. That's where we come from. So we have a pact with the land, and we have ceremonies. The land is sacred with food, with chicha, with fireworks, because we love fireworks. Yeah, that's true, and we give them cocoa. We sacrifice animals to give blood to the earth, because the and we also give it chicha, so the earth is happy. So that's what we do with the land. We not only do that with the land, but also with the rivers, because in the rivers is where the spirits live, and they take care of that. And the spirit are feminine. They are girls. So that's our major concern is to defend the Rio Blanco, the river, because it's an aggression to our spirits. There are some of those, and those waters maintain our equilibrium, and that pact we call them composturas, that we do it. We do these rituals in community, in special days with the families. We bring flowers from all colors. Colors are very important. They have a meaning. We use smoke. We have to share with the community, and that's part of that part of our culture, the spirituality. So it's the cosmovision that it's against the life, that it is seen as a project of death, of destruction, the capitalism, because the destruction of this planet has a name, and it's capitalism. Is that extractivist model, even in countries in the south that call themselves progressive, you see that the rights of the peoples are being violated. So that cosmovision is our root. It's the root for a plan of life, but also for our resistance. So that plan of life comes from the corn that it is comes from millennium, and is part of our food, is part of our food sovereignty, from a political concept, a historical, the right of health to eat well, not to eat junk food. So all those types of life, they show us that there are alternatives. In terms of energy, the criticism to consumerism is that energy needs to be looked at from other perspective. We are having this debate about the generation of electricity. It has to be. We are about to have an exchange with our sisters and brothers from Chiapas. But we have not. But it's not just that. The indigenous people are not an island, are not a fashion. We are main actors of the developments in all people. We are in all countries, and we have to have a say on all topics. That's why we are promoting a process of refundation of Honduras that has to do with which kind of country we dream. We have the right to dream. It's subversive and terrorist to dream a country with sovereignty, with liberty, with self-determination, without patriarchy, without capitalism, without racism. Is that a sin? Is a crime? We are demanding, and we are exercising that right. We made a call to the social movement, to the popular movement, not just the indigenous. We have been there, like working really hard, and organizing many communities throughout the country, and we succeeded in carrying out an exercise of political thinking, of dreaming this country in a pedagogical exercise, freeing in on the fields of territory, water, a society without patriarchy, with equality of rights, and of course for sexual diversity, with the right of art, because that's reading is also subversive for discolonizing the mind. The time of security, not from the logic of the empire, neoliberal logic. We talk about the democratization of communication, sovereignty of energy. We talk about 22 topics strategic in an exercise of a popular assembly, Indigenous and Black, building power proposals, and debating how Honduras will be like if we were able to achieve that refoundation of Honduras. And no, it was not enough just to have a declaration for refoundation. We thought that we determined that we should, just making a statement is easy. Refoundation in organizations, in our movements, in all our practices, with political ethos, which is also an element that we have debated. So also that path means to build a model, a different model from a different type of development. If we need to give it another name, we will give it another name. And so that power will be able to bring the economic power where we have a voice, not where just 10 or 100 people speak with us. No, that's not what we want. That's the big challenge in working for the refoundation. That it is feminist, religious, from the barrios, from the urban and the rural, is to really organize ourselves towards that model, that power, that decisions, that makes the decisions, and we see as the way to change the way. How to change it. There are 6 military bases we don't want to continue to be the country with those statistics being the most violent country in the world. That's terrible. We don't want to be the country where 80% of the people lives in misery, and we're given the territory to the transnational in a silver platter. No, we insist on our right to dream, and for that we need to build our world of the difference so it can emerge, so it is position itself, and it gives so it lets the critical thinking, it's open space for the critical thinking, and it's and to emancipation, and so we can work there. And you can say that these women are crazy. That's impossible. But in this struggle, you have to be crazy. Otherwise, you cannot walk. You have to give birth. You have to create. You have to invent. You have to dream. You have to be crazy. And to keep there, and to stay there, keep there with our roots, with our culture, learning, de-learning, and recreating a new thing, different things. So that's one thing. So briefly, I know that the time is going. You were.
around the alliances. We've had all these difficult, hard, well, our organizations, we're always talking because we're working together, we've been tied. And so we've been making efforts around neighborhoods. It's not just the indigenous theme. I mean, all these themes, there's so many themes that have so much to do with us. We're on the theme of the defense of rivers. There is a network of Caribbean indigenous defenses of the rivers. There's a campaign to demilitarize the continent. Additionally, before the coup, there was a second hemispheric conference gathering against demilitarization, something that's been really strong. And we were in all the things that we were talking about in terms of the struggle against the dam, and all the struggle against that company in Panama. There's a lot of coordination, and with agendas that were very packed. We are now in the defense of the territories and in international spaces, joining with, sharing experiences as the defenders, as strugglers, as people in the struggle, people defending the term. The UN embassy is using the term of defenders to diminish our more rebellious struggles, and to soften the things, and because it's written by the United Nations. No, we go further than that, and we are in those spaces in active defense of the territories. And I think it's a grand opportunity to continue learning and knowing experiences of other movements that are in similar situations as us. Of course, there is, the women working together, the feminist movement has been very important for the solidarity also. The things that we need to do, that we need to inspire as women. And so it's a little bit of a summary. You had a question? Then we have another round. Thank you for being here and for all your work. Thank you.
This question in English to be very precise. As we all know, there's a lot of women and children, especially men also, coming from Honduras, from Guatemala, and from El Salvador, more than any other place. And when we advocate for those women and children to get refuge here in the United States, we have a problem of the message getting distorted into all Latinos, all Central Americans are monsters. And so it's difficult for us to advocate for the women and tell the stories or help them tell their stories in court and in the press about the violence that they suffer or would continue to suffer if they stayed at home, without adding to the racist narrative of black and brown men as monsters, as inherently violent, and without and while trying to explain the history. Right? I remember 30 years ago, a professor here responding to a question about what does the United States want with Honduras, and he said, a parking lot. The United States wants to turn Honduras into a parking lot for all of its military bases, and that's what has happened, right? Not interested in the Honduran people or anything like that, but just using it as a place from which to have its military capitalist operations. Anyway, it's hard to explain that history. The press doesn't want to hear a complicated history of the violence that the United States helped engender. Do you have suggestions for immigrants, refugees, and advocates and friends to tell that story without playing into, again, a narrative of North Americans saving Central American women from Central American men and all of that kind of old narrative. Thank you.
Ajá. Casi no la entendí.
There's one back here, and then I guess two more over here. So,
Bueno, gracias por estar con nosotros.
Thank you for being with
Tengo
us.
dos preguntas.
I have two questions.
Rápidos.
Quick
Bueno,
questions.
la primera pregunta tiene
The
que ver
first
con
question
la
is
discriminación
around discrimination that you
del
suffer
pueblo indígena y
as
también
indigenous people
afrodescendientes.
and as Afro-descendant people.
Y, bueno, la pregunta es cómo
And the question is,
papel tiene
what
la
role
discriminación en este
does the discrimination play in this development model that you've mentioned
pone en peligro
that put in danger your communities, your people? Is there a connection? For example, if these companies take advantage of this discrimination to further their development model. And the other question is more specific, perhaps, around how have you been able to.
Mencionaron que visitó la relatora especial sobre los pueblos indígenas, así que como abogado me interesa
reach
saber
the UN.
cómo
You were
funciona
mentioning the
esa
special realtor of human rights. So how did you start that process, the dialogue between the UN and your people? I think there were two. Are you living? Yes. Can I? Yes, I'm living. And then the lady behind, and after that, then we will go to the question. So the conversation that you're bringing, and this,
it puts the struggle on an extraordinary moral plane. So the term we would use to describe, I think, what you're saying is there.
No hay traducción.
is,
you do it again, please. Sorry.
Repeat, please.
So the moral claim that you offer is very, very strongly situated in a number of different discourses. It's about women's struggles. It's about a struggle for cultural autonomy. It's about a struggle that involves rights that you want to be free to cause to evolve. And that part is very clear. The part that didn't come through very clearly today, so I want to ask you about this part, is whether the northern model of rights that are located in land sovereignty, in title to land and in possession to land, and in political control over land, whether that still has any important meaning, and whether you're attempting to further that very practical, non-metaphysical part of the struggle. So there are two models, and I just want to suggest to you, you know them very well, I'm sure, but the question I have is, are you making use of these models now, or have you rejected them? One model has to do with the relationship between land and title to land and possession of land. And that comes through Anglo-American history, among other places, Spanish and Mexican history as well. And the other model is the one that's been adopted for purposes of their modern struggle by Catalonia and by Scotland, and sometimes on certain days of the week by Texas. And, and this has to do with secession from the greater political community, so that the kind of control that you have is over a land and a people's rights, and it can depend on the independence of the state itself. It has to do with secession from the state. So I'm interested in whether either of those two conceptual models serves your interests now.
So you have articulated strong connections between capitalism, transnational capital, and the state that Honduras went through. I see that you have that you see these facts as very interlinked, but I think you have also have go to international processes, and as a student of law and also as an intern in the Inter-American system, I want to see if you see points in the international and national law for your struggles, for the vision, and for the vision that you have for the world. I have to leave, but I really appreciate your presence and thank you so much.
Bueno. Quisiera.
So, I couldn't hear the first one while there was a little bit of interference. In terms of discrimination on the imposed development model, that's all the policies and the political and also the legal framework, it's based in discrimination. It's made official, and we can see that when those laws are approved, when in free trade agreements are approved, that there is systematic discrimination that wants to make exclusion and marginalization normal. So in Honduras, if you read in the law of intervention of communication, it's the intelligence law that is about security, but has a chapter on the security of private investment and criminalizes to those of us who are struggling, and that includes the indigenous people who are in resistance in defense of their natural resources. So not only there, from the legal perspective, we see all the violations carried out by judges when they pass resolutions that are terrible. For instance, to say, like in the case against us that I was mentioning before, on the Blanco River, one of the arguments they use, that one of the evidence of the violence of copying was the slogans. Do you know what the slogans, right? The slogans that you shout, and one of them is the rivers are not for sale. The rivers are need to be taken care of, and that was an argument that we were a terrorist organization that were incentivizing violence. And the other one is what the banners that say copying, and also the way how the indigenous women are treated in the hospital or in the school, in the university. Which percentage of indigenous are at the universities? Almost none. Very, very few. So there is a discrimination, a cultural discrimination. It's in the churches, in the fundamentalist churches that nullify the cultural practice that I was mentioning, like the healing. They are telling men, don't let the women to organize, like copying, because that comes from Satan. It looks like it resembles the Inquisition 500 years ago. But all that, and transnationals, of course, they benefit from it. the fact that the Minister of Natural Resources, Environment, Energy, and Mining, that's how it is called now, that he says that Lenca people doesn't exist. So to really save the Honduran government to comply with treaty number 169, and he's awarded he's awarded as prosecutor, and we had been launching the denounces at the prosecutor's office, and the first thing that he does when he takes his position is to go and to threaten us, and because of our struggle in Rio Blanco. So who benefits? The companies. So that prosecutor, he is involved in corruption cases. He was one of the prosecutors that pushed that law and the basis for the model cities. He played a key role on it. So it all is done. So it's in favor of the transnational companies, and discrimination, you will see it everywhere. The violation, the attacks to women, that they are not allowed to sell their produce because they want to establish a big mall, and the indigenous people rebel against that plan, and we took the side. So from that until all those judicial mechanisms that favor the big transnational, same the free trade agreements, the Trans-Pacific, the last one we were talking about, the Alliance for Prosperity, 100,000 million will be given to corrupt governments like the one in Honduras to stop the migration, the drug trafficking. Those are the benefits for transnational, and thanks to that, the racism and discrimination. So on that struggle, I don't know if I understood well.
With the theme of local control of the land, we always have the issue where the decisions, the autonomy, our own self-determination to defend the territories, we have to do it with or without titles, because it is our right. And again, that theme that we mentioned before, the legitimacy. The community titles help, but it isn't the grand solution to the territorial conflicts, the threat of extermination, the judicial right, the international rights for indigenous people for the all over the world is something good, but it has its limitations. It says consult, but when a community says no and is saying that they don't want a particular thing, it is quite limited in terms of our exercise, the exercise of our own self-determination. I don't know about the debate of separating ourselves from this thing that is now the state of Honduras, but we do know that there are limitations, not only in the concepts, how is it constructed, although the indigenous people have been involved in tremendous struggles, as in the UN acknowledgement of indigenous struggles, we are people who do have to determine our own path. as human rights, inalienable rights that we have because we have memory, we have history, we are human beings, and to exercise our concept of justice in terms of land for justice and for rights. Well, even though it's not written, you have to get rid of a transnational company because they are destroying our culture, our rivers, our land. For us, that is very important. Or to take to community court a fellow member because he took sexual advantage of a member of our community. And this is something that we understand. Life is important for individuals. I'm going to stop there. I wanted to do a summary because we are getting close to the end. I think all these questions are related to each other. I wanted to do a little bit of a summary. Indigenous people, a lot of them have an oral history. And one of the big discriminations in terms of history, judicial history, is to not allow not just the translation but the interpretation. One thing to go to trial as a model of life that is different from a system. Here we talk about the rights of customs, and you all have studied this. How do we elevate these rights of customs to be able to apply justice? So why is it that we are from an oral history, oral culture, we should have the guarantee that whenever we do are in these judicial processes, we need to be able to have people know what is going on. Same thing here with immigrants. There should be a guarantee that people should understand why you are here and what are you being charged with. And many times, that is an element that isn't even touched. Honduras is a country where the third article of the Constitution says that we are all equal. And still, something even more serious is said where the official language is Spanish. From there is a grave problem because Honduras has multiple languages and multiple cultures. Honduras is a multicultural, multilingual place. That is a change that has to be made in the constitution of the country. Everyone says the official language is Spanish, and so therefore the other languages don't exist and don't matter. I wanted to add a little bit to what my comrade was saying in terms of access to United Nations. It isn't an issue. The regulator gets to Honduras and, responding to being called for a conflict that's happening because Honduras is giving reports every year about these things that are happening, and every time that Honduras is giving these reports, they say everything is fine, everything is going great, there are no problems with the human rights, and there are advances. Every year since the coup, there's been a force to legitimize themselves internationally, to give themselves stature at the international level. And so we have succeeded so that they were able to get to Rio Blanco. And yesterday, the day that I was coming, she did meet with the Garifuna Community in the city of La Ceiba to be able to hear the issues of problems in the community. We do see it as a game from the United Nations because there was a big struggle with the United Nations because they refused the participation from people. It was going to be in a hotel. It didn't want the people to speak about the problems that were happening, the theme of the attack. There was an assassination of mosquitoes around an issue of drug trafficking. There were women and children killed, and we had to make a huge effort so that one of those women, Mezquita women, could testify. We took advantage of these spaces where we were not invited to, but fortunately there was someone that had worked with enabled a bridge so that we could make it there. And so yes, we did participate in some spaces. For example, a Lincoln comrade was at an event to be able to present the alternative shadow opportunity, as they say. And so we are in those spaces trying to make sure that people can hear our voices. Sometimes you say, what the fuck, why we keep doing this if nothing is changing? But you have to do it. You have to do it because you have to insist. It's like the drop is coming, it keeps dripping, and we need to keep doing it. And we do it because we believe it's important. It's something that this woman was saying, because we are not discussing separatism like it's happening in other places. In this separation, this division, we think it's important that our self-determination is recognized in the state, and we have the rights to make our own decisions, whether we're wrong or not, but to let us do it. No, because what happens now is that other people need to make decisions for us, and you who are descendants of Latinos, that our countries tell us what we need to do. Let us make our own mistakes. Let we screw it up, but we do it and we resolve it. That is the problem that has with sovereignty. And in your house, you decide what to do. That they don't want to allow. Also, and a little with what this woman was saying, it was also a little complicated to understand in terms of immigration. Today we were with Denise. We had a rich dialogue, savory, as we say. It's another issue that really is worth opening up the conversation around immigration and what has been the treatment of people. Immigration, the industry has been converted into an industry, and you all know very well. But also, it has also been converted into something around political issue, one party or another. We see how the Republicans and Democrats put themselves on one side or another to see how they can win. I don't know if anyone has seen following Donald Trump as a crazy man who wants to do a wall, huge wall. And Donald Trump, it could be that he could win. Some say he can win, some say he won't. But the issue of immigration has become an issue for each political candidate. And it is an issue of business. And we notice that it is also, there is no political will to resolve the problem of immigration. No, neither in our countries nor in the U.S. And every day it's a vicious circle where every day, and I see it as always an issue in any candidate, immigration. And the tendency moves. It's a circular, it's an industry, absolutely. For the industry of people who are locked up, the security, the police, it's an industry. And while the sale of food, if we make a list of all the things that signifies, it's a huge industry that generates millions of dollars. That's why there is no interest to combat it, because it generates revenue. And while we don't touch that particular issue, will always be a problem, and it's going to increase and get worse. I'm going to end by saying one thing. There is always a stigma of immigrants. Women, some come because they are abused by their husband, and there's always a form of stigmatizing the immigrant. And I think that today we were talking to our friend Denise. There is no political decision to improve the living conditions in the South. And all the people are going to come here. That's the big truth. People will be walking towards the north. There are hundreds of thousands, which is unimaginable. That they could be and what they could do. And people told me, it's, give money to the banks so people can access them. Give money for security. Give money for infrastructure, for highways. Do you think that's going to minimize people wanting to come to the U.S.? We're in a grave problem. The issue of immigration is serious. I'm sorry if I offended your candidate, Donald Trump. I hope I haven't offended anyone.
See, if somebody is thinking like that, I think that you have problems, because if you look at migration that way, if there is something that the North and South is united, it's through migration. I have not seen something like that. You are working on that field because, as Denise was saying, it got me sick. The last crusade, because it was something about humanity. It's a tragedy of humanity, and you don't see something like it. So we need to keep. We need to continue to work. And remember, there are more people left Honduras than Guatemala and El Salvador. It's a failed state. It's a country that it is on the verge, where everyone wants to live, and we are in the resistance because we believe that we have the right to build a country there. We want to build something that is livable in our country. Thank you so much.
Gracias. Gracias.